So this morning we're going to talk about grafting apples, and we're talking apples mainly because apples for a homeowner are a lot easier to have success with. And then once you have that success, then you can move over into some of the other stone fruits and some of those. And so that's why we're doing apples. Okay. I've been doing apple grafting for about 15 years, and kind of started out just kind of a little hobby thing. And then more and more people were interested in doing it and learning how to do it. And if you think back, probably 100 years ago, a lot of our grandparents, great grandparents, and that probably had an apple orchard or another orchard in their area that they knew how to do grafting and budding on those trees to get the varieties that they liked, that they would then produce ciders or apple crisp or canning or drying or whatever with. And so it's kind of like a lost art. And that's why it seems like there's been a resurgence in learning how to do some of this. And there's a lot of information out there from different extension websites and out on the website videos that you can go look at. And so we're going to touch on the basics. And I encourage you, if you do have, if this is something of interest to you, to go out and look at some of those, because there's a lot of good information out there. And I kind of threw this slide out here showing you some of those that are out there. One thing that we do need to talk about here, with whether it's apples or pears or peaches, that if it is a plant protected variety, that it is illegal to propagate it. And so some of you are saying, man, I wish, I could get my hands on some Cosmic Crisp or Sweet Tango or some of these newer varieties that are club or patented varieties. And until that patent wears off, it is illegal to do that. So let's get that right from the beginning, okay? But there's a lot of these older ones that are free to gather scion and to graft with. So that's my take on plant protected varieties. When we look at doing grafting, basically what we're trying to do is we're taking two pieces. We're taking a rootstock and a scionwood. We're putting them together. And if we do it correctly, that is going to heal and grow together as a single unit, or a tree in this case for us. And so some of the terms that you're going to hear me talk about or use today is the scionwood. And when we're talking scionwood, we're talking the fruiting cultivar. So we're talking apples. So that's going to be like the Gala, the Cameo, the Brayburn, the Honeycrisp, whatever variety of apple that we've got. And that's the top part of our tree. The bottom part of our tree is going to be the rootstock, and that rootstock is going to be what controls how big the tree is going to get. So we're going to talk here in just a second, those semi-dwarfs, dwarfing trees, standard trees, that's where that comes from, in that rootstock. And with some of the newer rootstocks that we're seeing coming onto the market, there's actually disease resistance. And if you're familiar with fire blight is one that there's been quite a bit of interest in. And so some of the newer rootstocks have resistance to fire blight in those. In the marketplace right now, apples by far has the most rootstocks that you can select from. So just like you can select for the variety, you can also select for the rootstocks. And we'll show you some of that data here in just a second. But there is some research that's being done with cherries, sweet cherries, and putting those onto some dwarfing rootstocks. But you're really not, like, if you say, hey, what's the best one for an apricot? There's not a lot of interest in apricots. And so there's just not a lot of rootstock options out there for them. And then the last term that you're going to hear is the graft union. And that's basically where we put the rootstock and the scionwood together. And you can kind of see that area right here is going to be those three terms. And that's what we're going to use. Some of you are saying, okay, why do I want to graft a tree, a fruit tree? And this is an example that I use in classes that I teach. This is a sweet cherry tree with a little Cavalier car next to it. That tree's, massive. And you think in terms of sweet cherries, if cross-pollination, I need to have multiple trees. And so they're really big. Well, as a commercial grower, the ones in blue are kind of the reasons why they look at grafting. They want smaller trees. We've gone from that big tree, standard tree, to these basically trees that we're putting every 2 to 3 feet on a pole in the center in our orchard. We might have, basically, if you look at research we've got these new varieties now that we might have one tree in our research plot that we want to now market. And so basically we need to produce those new trees. And so grafting or budding is a way to do that and do it very quickly. For us as a homeowner, basically things that we're probably looking at is going to be something like this. Maybe we want a tree that has 3 or 4 different varieties of apples on one tree because I don't have a big backyard and I can do that. Well, maybe one of the other things is maybe we've had some damage to one of our trees, and just kind of showing you in this picture, this might be something that would happen in the wintertime. We've had rabbits, or we've had gophers, or maybe summertime a squirrel came along and chewed on that before we noticed it. And so now we've got damage to that tree that we need to repair. Probably in a homeowner's case, we're just, unless it's something that's a favorite tree, we're probably just going to yank that tree out and go get another one and replace it. But through grafting, and this is what's called a bridge graft, we can come along and put these grafts and bridge over this damaged area of this tree. And doing it correctly, we can have success and save that tree. So that's a bridge graft. Well, maybe we have, and this is something that happened, 20, 30 years ago. If you were up in Washington State, you had a big standard orchard of red delicious apple trees. And now all of a sudden we with Honeycrisp apples, everybody loves Honeycrisp, and we've got the newer varieties like Cosmic Crisp and Sweet Tango. We had these big standard trees, and they could come in, and because the tree's already established, and I'm looking at over here on the left, they could come in and basically chop all of our branches off and come in and do what we call top working, in which they would then come in with those Honeycrisp apple scion wood and graft it into this. And you would have something like here on to the right then that would come out of that graft, and you would leave those all in for a year's time period and come back and pull off. You'd only leave one of these scion woods on there, and now all of a sudden you've taken this tree from a red delicious over to the newest, latest, greatest variety. And so it was very easy for them to do that because you have a system that's already established. My tree's there to grow that new tree and do it very quickly and come back into production. Because if not, basically, if they were to have to come in and rip that orchard out, you're looking at 5 to 7 years maybe of standard trees before that would come back into production. And so they're able to do it very quickly through grafting from there. So let's talk just a little bit about when grafting is done. Grafting is basically done in the springtime of the year, late winter, early springtime, when both the rootstock and the scion wood are dormant. They need to be dormant because you can imagine we're making some cuts there. The nutrients and water is not flowing across that cut right. So if that scion wood was growing, that tree would die very quickly and our success rate would be basically at 0. So when we start looking at grafting, we want to probably, the first question you want to ask yourself is, what size of a tree do I want? And I kind of already touched on this. We're looking at rootstock is what controls the size of our trees. And we probably have heard, this is a dwarf tree, this is a semi-dwarf tree, this is a standard tree. Depending upon what rootstock we select, that dwarf tree can be something that's in that 20 to 40% the size of a standard tree. And those semi-dwarfs are going to be from that 40% up to an 80% the size of a standard tree. And a standard tree is going to be obviously those 80 to 100% size. And that is done through what type of a rootstock we select. So you can kind of see they've listed here on the bottom an M27, a Mark, M26, 7s, and that. And those are just labels that the researchers have given those varieties depending upon probably the crosses and where they were bred at to get those rootstocks. For those of you who do better with pictures, you can kind of see. So this is what we're talking about here. We have a standard apple tree that we're going to, is 30 by 30. Maybe it's a 40 by 40 foot in diameter when it's fully mature. But by grafting and putting that onto a semi-dwarf rootstock, I can now put 4 apples in that same spot that I would have put one standard tree. And I can put 9 of those dwarf apple trees in that same location. So you can kind of see, not only does it diameter wise makes it nicer, but it also, the height of it comes down as well. And some of those trees, dwarf trees, they'll get maybe 6 feet high is all when they're fully mature, versus a standard tree that might be up in that 25 to 30 foot range. And so that's the benefits of looking and understanding those rootstocks and what we want to be grafting onto. Here's just, you can go out and Google this, but I just Googled apple rootstocks, and this is some work that was done by Cornell, and they kind of placed them in their website. Anything that's class 1 is going to be over on the kind of 1, 2s, and 3s are going to be dwarfing rootstocks. 4, 5, 6s, and 7s are kind of that semi-dwarf rootstock, and then 8, 9s, and 10s are going to be those larger standard type trees out there. And if you go into it and you can click on these different rootstocks, and what it'll do, this is some stuff from Washington State. You can see that here's a Geneva 41 rootstock, and you click on it and it tells you that it's a dwarf rootstock. Here's what it was crossed with. It is fire blight resistant, which is one of the newer ones. Anything that is has the G or Geneva in front of it is going to have resistance, fire blight resistance to it. But it also has Phytophthora, root rot, and replant disease tolerance as well. So a really nice rootstock. You see it's early bearing because it is a dwarf tree, has good winter hardiness, very little suckering. The downfall of it is with most of these dwarf trees is that they do require support for the life of the tree. And so you've got to have a trellis, you got to do it against the wall, somehow to keep that tree upright when it has a fruit load on it. So you can go in and choose those rootstocks based upon your soil types, on how big you want it to be, plant back diseases. There's a lot of things you can select those rootstocks on. The nurseries and that grow the rootstocks, basically, you're thinking, okay, now I want to be ordering those. Springtime now is a great time to be ordering those, but the trees were actually harvested last fall and they're sitting in a warehouse. This is just an example of one that I went to one time and saw the rootstock. If you're looking at doing small quantities, so someplace like Rain Tree Nursery, you can order 1 of this, 2 of that, 3 of those, and they'll ship it to you typically when you want those. If you're doing something a little more aggressive and you're looking at large quantities, a nursery like Trico Nursery will sell you bundles of 100, and that's the minimum of 100 is what they sell you. And so it just depends upon what you're looking for. Most of those rootstocks, like at Rain Tree Nursery, are probably going to cost you in that $4 to $5 a piece range. Trico Nursery, where you're getting a bundle, depending upon what you're getting, is probably going to be down in that $2 to $3 a piece range. So they're not hugely expensive to do that with. I want to show you or talk to you and show you how to collect cyanwood. Remember, that's going to be our fruiting cultivar. So we're going to go through that and show you how to collect that right now. Hopefully we got some pictures to do that with. Typically I do this presentation live, but we couldn't do that today. So hopefully pictures will help you with this. When we're looking for cyanwood to graft with, we're looking for this top new growth. So these water sprouts, this is a fairly young tree, but you've seen it all on these older trees where you come in and maybe remove a larger branch and you get these water sprouts that come up here in the center of the tree that are just 1-year-old wood. That's what we like to graft with. So you can see that here's some in the center picture right here. There's no spurs that are coming off of it. This is all last year's growth, and that's what I like to harvest to be able to graft with. The other thing that's important to remember is that when you order your rootstock, they're probably going to ask you what size you want. I typically will use 1/4 inch material. Some of that can get up to 1/2 inch. Some of it can be 3/16, some of it's 1/8 inch. And so what you want to try and do is match your cyanwood diameter with my rootstock size diameter. And realize that just because you want 1/4 inch material, It might be a little bit big when it gets here, it might be a little bit small, so you need to make those adjustments for it. So I just kind of show you that here on this picture on the right, you can see that scion wood is approaching a 1/2 inch diameter. So if my rootstock is coming and it's all 1/4 inch, I'm going to have a hard time matching that up, and my success rate is not going to be as good. But as long as if I move up into the center here, I've got some 1/4 inch, that's perfect, because I've got some small stuff up here, some hopefully the right size diameter here, and I've got maybe some larger diameter stuff on the bottom that I can use with that. So I've gone out, I cut that off. Now I can kind of see I ordered 1/4 inch material. I got 1/4 inch scion wood that I'm going to be grafting with, and so perfect match there. My center picture, I kind of show you that sometimes on the bottom it's too big, so I'll cut that off. So that's why I have the red X on the bottom piece there. It's just too big, I can't use it. The top part of it is probably too small, and I also have some buds that may not be as mature from last year on that, and so I just want to get rid of that. And now my middle piece is what I'm going to be using, and if I'm going to use that right now today, that's great. But if I'm going to have to store that until my rootstock gets here, because I'm doing a little bit later in the springtime of the year or later winter, I want to do what I call process it. So I'm going to cut it up into some smaller pieces. So that's what this is showing here on the right. I took this piece in the middle and chopped it up into about 6-8 inch pieces there, that now I'm going to show you what you need to do to keep that until you're ready to use that. But if you're going to use it today, great, you can just go ahead and use it. So what I would then do is I would soak those pieces in a solution of Clorox bleach and water for about 2 to 3 minutes, just to kind of get rid of any bacteria that's sitting on the surface. And then I'm going to rinse it for another 2 to 3 minutes in just plain water. Once I have it rinsed, then what you're going to do is I place it in like a paper towel, and it could be anything that's going to hold some moisture against it. We don't want that to dry out in the meantime while it's sitting in the fridge. So it could be some peat moss, it could be some sand, sawdust, anything. Paper towels are just easy to get. I want it like a wrung out sponge consistency for being moist, and I just put it in there. I want to label that, because if you make collections of several different varieties of apples, you don't want to have it be mystery trees. So labeling it in the bag helps. And then I'm going to put it in kind of the salad compartment of that fridge, where it's in that 34 to 38 degree range, and I can keep it like that for several months. Realize that that the fresher that scion wood is, the better my success rate is going to be. If I keep that out, 8 weeks in the fridge like that, it's going to start deteriorating and going downhill, and my success rate will diminish as well. So maybe you have a neighbor that's got a good apple tree that you want to collect some scion wood off of, or somebody down the street that has it. That's great. Or maybe you don't know of any varieties, but maybe you read in a journal of an ancestor that said, you know what, man, there is a golden Parmaine that is out there that is a wonderful tree. And so this is a website, Maple Valley Orchards, that you can order. And I think they've got over 200 different varieties of apples. Most of them are heirloom type apples that you can go in and you can click on this and it will tell you about this. But if you knew the name of it, you could go in here and order scion wood from them. They will ship you a 12-inch stick. And this is a availability list from 2017. I just checked the other day. They're $4.50 for a 12-inch stick. And but I use this because, and I kept it because they have a lot of their different apples listed right here that I could show. Maybe you're looking for a North Pole apple or a Spartan apple that you want to get. And so you can go click at those and research those on their websites. And this is just one place that has these out there. Grafting tools. So the next thing you need to do is figure out how you're going to be doing it. If you're going to be using a grafting tool, I personally, scares me to death to turn people loose with a grafting knife. but here's some different examples of some grafting knives that are available. And these knives are anywhere from 20 to 40, 50 bucks out there. The tool that I like to use, and when I do grafting classes, is these grafting tools, Omega grafting tools. This one on the left is has some other blades, has a chip bud blade with it. This one is going to run you probably in that $40 to $60 range. This black tool on the right is going to run about $20 to $30 range. And so really quite economically out there to have a tool like this, that when I show you what it does, it works really well. So the idea is that with these tools, you take your cyanwood and your rootstock and you put it in this cutting blade, and here's the cutting blade. You center it right here on this orange piece that it cuts into, and it's going to make a cut similar to this, like a puzzle piece or Omega sign right here. And it consistently does that. So it's just like a pair of pliers. You squeeze it down, it makes that cut. And so hopefully you can start seeing, it's like, man, I just put that in there and it makes that cut. Yeah, every time it makes that similar cut. Now the idea is that I'm going to get that cyanwood and I'm going to make multiple cuts until I feel comfortable with it. And I have something that looks like this on the right-hand side. Then I'm ready to start doing my grafting. So I've got my rootstock, I've got my cyanwood, I've got my tools. Today's the day I'm going to do it. And what I'm looking for is I'm trying to match the diameter up somewhere on this rootstock with my diameter of my cyanwood. And so typically what I would like to do is, we can see this is where the rootstock has been grown. This is where I'm going to plant it at, right here at this level when I plant it. So I want to be 3 to 4 inches above that. And so I'm going to be up here at the top of this piece is where I want to be trying to match those diameters up with. And then on my cyanwood size, what I want to be doing is making my cut in between the nodes. And you're going to say, Mike, I thought we were talking about apples. This is a peach. And you're right. This is a peach and this is a cherry. But it shows how swollen these buds are. And this is where, somewhere right here is where I want to make that cut. Because I won't have to be wrapping around buds. I won't have to, pull those off. You can see how tight those inner nodes are right here, and makes that much, much tighter to try and do grafting with those. So sharp cuts in between the buds, that's what I'm doing. So I like to make this cut right here. I call it the rabbit ear cut on my rootstock side, and the opposite cut on my cyanwood. And the reason why I like it is because, and it's just a preference, when I go to wrap these two, I'm going to start down here on the bottom piece on my rootstock. And as I start wrapping, that's going to pull those rabbit ears and secure that against my cyanwood piece and pulls that together. And that's just a preference. So I make my cut on my rootstock side. I make the opposite cut, and I want to test fit those together, because sometimes I might have a piece that's larger on the left than on the right, and they just don't fit very well. And so what I can do is I've got lots of material, lots of room on those, so I make another cut, and I just keep on test fitting those until they work. The important thing to remember, and the reason why we're trying to match up the diameter of the rootstock and the cyanwood, is because we need contact between that cambio layer. And so on this larger picture on the right, you can see right here, this basically from right here to right here, that is probably a 30-second, maybe 2 seconds wide. That's the cambium layer. That's what I'm trying to line up between those two pieces that I'm making the cut on. You can see in this picture right here, here's my graft union. And if I can make 2 cuts like that, I probably have got good cambial contact on that area right there. And so I just do it to where I feel I have something that looks like that. I'll blow that up. You can see there's my cut with that Omega tool. Those are not the same piece that I just cut and put them back together. Those are actually two different branches that I cut to show you how easy it is to make those cuts with those tools. So if I have something like that, more than likely that cambium layer is going to match up between the two. So I make the cut, test fit them together. Now I'm ready to start putting it together. I want to leave two, no more than 3 buds. So you can see 1 bud, 2 buds. On this one, you see I left 3 buds. I basically, 1 bud would be sufficient. I leave 2 buds as a backup, no more than 3 buds on that cyanwood piece that I'm going to stick in there. I cut the top of it off because what I don't want is I don't want that to heal, this graft union to heal, and then it starts moving water and nutrients across that cambium layer and up into this tissue. And now all of a sudden I've got a foot-long piece of maybe 12 or 13 buds on that it's trying to move water and nutrients to. If I have 1 or 2, it's going to move that to these 2, and I've got a much better success. So once I've got my piece right here, I've cut off the top, I've got two buds. I'm going to come in and I'm going to dip this piece right here into some water just to keep it moist. So when I snap it in right here, I've got moisture there and it's not going to dry out. And now I'm going to secure it. And I like to use parafilm, and you can see some different examples of parafilm. This is what it looks like when I put that on the graft union. And as I mentioned, I like to start on the bottom and wrap, and I'll usually wrap up kind of at an angle, get to the top, and then I'll start back wrapping on back down. And it's sticky enough, it stretches and it sticks to itself, and so you pull it off and it's there. If I do that with electrical tape, again, I'm trying to secure the graft union and I'm trying to seal it. And that's what this parafilm or electrical tape does. Once I have my my graft union right there sealed up, now I want to take that top part and dip it in something to seal the end of it so that the top does not dry out. And you can kind of see it right here on the tops of these. I use a product called Doc Farwell, but we could use candle wax, we could use Elmer's glue, we could use anything that's going to seal that top part of it. And if I'm doing a bunch of them, typically what I will do is I will do multiple ones and put them in a bag like this with some sawdust or some sand, something that will hold that moisture. And now what we're going to do is we're going to callus those grafts, or excuse me, heal the grafts and let that callusing begin. And so in our house, we're at 60 to 70 degrees. That's what those temperatures needs to be to have a good, successful callusing going on right there. Those plants don't need sunlight when they're in the house. We just need to have warm temperatures and keep those roots moist in a bag like this. And then over about a 3 to 4 week period, you're going to see that those buds are going to start to grow and to where eventually, and I'm going to keep them this way, it could be 10 to 14 days. If I needed to avoid frost, I'm going to keep them a little bit longer. But I don't want to have this new growth on it and then I set it outside and have that frost hit and kill those new buds. So avoid all frost if possible. If I'm going to have some new growth like I've got here in this picture, I need to make sure and condition or harden those plants off before setting them out. And then I'm going to put them in a grow bed that is 2 to 3 feet apart. I hate containers, so I'm going to put it in a grow bed, and then they're probably going to grow that way for 2, maybe 3 years until where I've got good feathering on that tree. And it looks like something that I would pick up at the nursery. So it's not a quick process. If what you're going to see, first of all, when in the house, you're probably going to see that those rootstock buds down below in that 3 to 4 inch piece are going to start to push. They're going to start to want to grow, and just take your fingers and rub those off. We don't want something to happen like in this picture where I see those rootstock buds are growing and my graft union is right there and my cyanwood buds are just sitting there. That plant's putting all the energy into growing rootstock buds and not my cyanwood. And so just flake those off a lot quicker when we see them start to push. If you do electrical tape, wait 6 to 8 weeks until you've got some pretty good growth on your cyanwood buds. And then I just want to come in and slit with like a razor blade or an X-Acto knife. Just make a slit through the tape. Don't try and peel it off. Otherwise, you're more than likely that tape's adhered to the bark on that, and it will strip the bark off of your in that graft union area. So just slit it, let it fall off naturally. Here are some reasons why you're not going to have success. If you kind of follow these steps that I've kind of showed you here quickly, you watch some of the other things, I'll bet you as a homeowner, you can have in that 50 to 60% success rate. If you're really good, really meticulous, you can probably be in that 80 to 90% success rate. Here's some resources to where you can look at some of the different publications that are out there and some other things. So that's quick and down on how to do grafting with apple trees.